we started because of the church's reluctance to sponsor any of our teams because we were trying to raise money, and we had to desist, according to the church, from raising money by raffles.
A group of us were talking one night about the possibilities of forming another club. So what happened then, we then had a meet with the rector at the time, a chap by the name of John Reed. He'd been there for several years at Gladesville. A pretty tight man, he played the ball hard, but he stuck to the rules. And so we had a short chat with him and told him, what was happening and where we should go. And, well, in his own right, he said, well, look, he couldn't condone a club doing that, you see.
So a move was then started to start another club. And of course, Bob Clark was the architect of this.
Yes, well, Bob, of course, was a big giant of a man. He was big in stature and big in thoughts. And at the time, he worked for the well, it was the Australia Post, actually.
So from that point, I think that's when it was decided, okay, well, we'll have a meeting. I think Bob called a meeting of parents just to see what support we could get. And from there, it developed then that the support came. Everybody was keen to see the club move on, try different competitions. And the competition at that stage here was the Ride District Association, I think they called it, which then subsequently, a year or so later, became the Gladesville Hornsby competition.
Bob Clark was a master at picking people for jobs, and anyone that had any sort of ability, apart from soccer, coaching or whatever he thought, or whoever he thought that could do something for the club, he earmarked them and hauled them onto the committee. And you have a look right through those names, and you'll find there's people there with some particular expertise. And he was a master at picking them and buttonholing them and saying, well, I want you.
Bob could walk up to you, Parcel, I want to talk to you about something. Well, yeah, it could be anybody. And before you know it, said, yeah, Bob, I'll do that. But he had that knack that he could come up to people and just sort of get them on side, get them enthused in what was happening, and got them going, you see.
He was a man that could do things that fellas of our age, who were only in their 20s, we didn't have those avenues. And he was well known for his fairly bombastic attitude, but for those who knew him, knew it was just a big bluff.
Bob Clark, I've got to say, I've never met anyone that could organise like he could. He not only started the club off, he knew everyone in the club. He knew what their trades were, if they had a trade or what their professions were, and he used them as a way to develop this club.
When they had the initial meeting, the formation of Ravens, I think that was designed, I think it's probably in the minutes there somewhere about that they were forming a social club, more or less to cater for the needs of the children.
Yeah, I often remember a couple of mates, Larry Townsend and Robbie Nell. I lived just up in Brereton Street. My parents lived in Oscarthorpe Road, and I was walking down the hill and I ran into them and they said, there's a new football club we're going to start. Why don't we go up and join up? So that's how I got started.
50 years ago, I was 14. Had been playing for Christchurch, and then in 1961 commenced playing soccer with the Ravens via my father and mother being foundation members of the club. So
we entered our teams, or we worked at first, we let parents know what the setup was. The people had the option if they could stay with Christchurch, and we supported Christchurch. I think we didn't take any monies out of what was in the funds there. Not that there was a lot, but there was enough there to keep them going. So it ended up, I think, we probably had enough to start off with about eight or 10 teams from Ravens at that stage.
The name Ravens came up there was a lot of discussion with the first few meetings we had. There was going to be Gladesville Wanderers and so forth, and we wanted to retain the black and white strip. And then we was thinking about a pocket and Gladesville Wanderers. Well, what do you put on a pocket with Gladesville Wanderers? We needed an emblem sort of thing. So we had been looking at this place here at Peel Park, and it was called Raven Park. And there was a Raven Street just up the road there. It runs down nearly into the park there. And so it became known as Gladesville Ravens. That's how it started off.
In my time, we always had Peel Park. Yeah, it was not in the first year. I think it was after that, and the working bees that were performed down here was just amazing. You know, there was people down here all the time. I remember because we had to raise money through bottle drives and raffles and things like that. I remember we worked hellishly hard trying to turf the field, and we spent £300, which is a precious lot of money in those days, putting topsoil on the ground, and then the day after it was all nicely spread out, the topsoil. It rained and washed all it down into Morrison Bay.
Yeah, well, once again, Bob was the instigator of it. We had a lot of members who lived around this area before, and it was originally part of the Peel's dairy, I think, or it was owned by Tommy Peel.
Well, I'm a bit lucky that my parents just live up the road at Oscarthorpe Road, so, and a lot of the guys who lived in the back here of Peel Park and Stanbury Street and Champion Road and things like that. So we used to play down here as kids, and it was all overgrown. I always remember there was a large central mound of soil that was covered in kaiku grass, and there was a large tree. I always have vivid memories of that. And
of course, Bob, in his inimitable way, managed to get the council to level it all for us and and things like that. So that saved a lot of time, and basically whatever they did, we had to build on top, so we had a good surface to start with.
And then we used to have working bees in those days and dig out foot squares of grass and plant them here, there and everywhere in a pattern sort of thing to get the grass to grow on Peel Park. And we used to have a water tap up near John Sunderland's back fence and a long hose and one sprinkler, and he used to come and move that sprinkler quite regularly, you know, to try and keep it going.
Whenever there was something on, everybody wanted to be part of it, sort of thing, you know. It's not like you see lots of organisations, you get the one or two people who they're stuck with it all the time. And but that was one thing. But again, I think whether they were all scared of Bob, I don't know. But Bob had that reason. He said, "I'll see you on such and such, fella. Yeah, Bob, I'll be there." If you weren't there, he'd come and get you.
The bottle drives were fantastic. There was a chap called Ronnie Farlow that had a big truck, and everyone didn't want to go with Ron because it was such a big truck, you had to work very hard.
Ronnie Farlow, he'd go out, and instead of being back in the yard at 12 o'clock so everyone could get home reasonably early, he'd come back about 1:30. And not only that, the truck would be loaded with bottles. Of course, what he used to do is he used to see a lot of people in the timber yard and tell them that as they came in, we got a bottle drive coming. "Oh, I'll save me bottles for you. Don't forget to come and get me bottles, Ronnie," and so forth.
Kewpie, Jack Cummings, he had a smaller little truck, and that was good to go with. The utes were good, but you didn't work as hard. But with Ronnie Farlow's big truck, you really had to work hard. And we had the different places that we used to go to for special empty bottles. One was Spike's place, and he used to occasionally get so inebriated that he'd toss a full one out, and it was great to celebrate a find of a full bottle of beer. And that was, I thought, that was the main reason for going to Spike's place. But later on I learnt that he had 2 very good-looking daughters, but I think that might have been attractive for some people too.
We used to have our regular customers. We used to have names for the people that liked to drink here and there, you know. We used to have one round in Oscarthorpe Road by the name of the wardrobe drinker, because the first time we went round there to get the bottles, they was pulling them out of the wardrobe, empty bottles.
One particular instance with Ronnie Farlow on his big truck, we had just an absolute full load of empty bottles of beer and other bottles, and we turned the corner up near the bowling club from Swan Street into Ryde Road and lost the lot. Turned a bit quick and the whole load went off, and we spent the rest of the day picking up broken bottles.
We had working bees down here in the early days, and we used to mow that ground down there with hand mowers. And of course, at soccer, we had that, this was Bob's idea, we give out notices to the managers or the coaches to let the children know, to let their parents, their father know it. We got a working bee down at the park. It's going to help them and their children eventually, you know, when the park's done. And it was amazing the number of people that turn up with their mower and say, I've got half an hour. You know, I've got my grass to cut at home. And of course, everyone was in the same boat.
We used to just line up with our Victor mowers, and we'd just go up and down, and to this day, my wife still reminds me that our new Victor didn't last very long. But it was enjoyable. There'd be 8 or 10 of us across mowing away, and we're kayaking, and we've always been a happy club, and I think it's still the same.
In all the A divisions, all the ages like 10s and 11s, we had some very strong sides right down. And even all our, what we called our premier side, we all thought we were good enough to do it. But I think the first year we went in, we got walloped by it was at Epping Sports or something they call themselves. They were a group of guys that, similar to us, they'd play together as a club up at Epping. And they had some good players in that team, but big, strong boys. And so I think we got beaten the first year. We sort of fronted up, so we went down, oh, this is no good. But we had a lot of success with the junior sides, and from there it's just grown and grown, you see. But what we were pleased to see, or I was pleased to see, that the Christchurch club then carried on for another 5 or 6 years, I think.
There was 14, 16, 18s in those days. You didn't go with individual years. So my first year was under 15, so I had under 15, under 16, under 17, under 18, 4 straight seasons. And then the players that I played with, there was no, I think from memory, no under 20 comp or anything like that in those days. So the team broke up and a lot of guys tried out for various grade soccer clubs. Some went to Canterbury, some went to RP Leichhardt. And some had very successful careers, others like myself had less successful. A lot of them played first grade, others didn't, and I was one that didn't. And then we all went our sort of separate ways and then came back to the club as and when, as life changed. But I did keep an involvement with the club through cricket for quite some time.
We just canvassed around the football teams who wanted to play cricket or something. So we got 2 teams to play in the all age limit, and then we got a lot of kids wanted to play in the under, I think it might have been 16s, 14, I forget. There wasn't a big age group in those days, but we had, I think, 14s, 12s, and even down to 10s or something. And it probably got a bit embarrassing that the younger kids, they used to win it every year. The kids had such potential. This is going back then to the likes of Jock and the Clarks, the McKinnons, Maxi Pride. They're all good cricketers, and some of them even went on and played grade cricket. And then it got to a stage that as they come up a little bit, we decided, well, we could bring these younger, Bob Clark was very keen to bring these young blokes up into the play C grade or something.
When I first played, I played in the C grade side, and that was a mixture of fathers and sons. Other guys that you're going to talk to, Noel Biles, guys that were in the C grade side were the oldies, were Noel, my father, John Sunderland, Bob Clark, all guys that basically helped were involved in the formation of the club. And I think all of those had a background with Christchurch.
Strangely enough, I was probably the only captain in history that was elected by an opposing team. Peter Brennan was captain of Henley, I think it was at the time. And Ron Parsons had told a group of us to turn up at Westminster Park to play cricket if we were interested in playing cricket. And of course, as Max Pride indicated, that in the C grade side was a lot of the older fellas and real young blokes, as they were then. And the A grade side was the middle of the road, or the younger of the older brigade foundation members. And Peter Brennan was captain of the Henley side, as I said. He came along when we turned up at Westminster Park, as Parso had told us to, and he said, "Where's your captain?" And I said, "I don't know, I was just told to be here." And he said, "Well, we've got to get on the field." He says, "You call your captain."
But what was really good about cricket was that some 20 years later, I played C grade with my own son. So I was able to do 20 years later what I'd done with my father. And that was one of the beauties, I thought, of the Ravens, that you could do that in one club.
From memory, I was one of the instigators of the golf club with Noel Biles, and I'm glad to see it's still going. That's probably 50 years old too, I suppose. And I managed a bit of golf. I wasn't much of a golfer, but I enjoyed playing. And I was always a target for the illegal drives, which I got hit one day we were playing at Mulefield, and I was standing on a par 3 there, just writing the score down, and some idiot yelled out 4. And of course, what do? You turn around and have a look, and he got me right in the eye. I don't remember much. They said I went up horizontal, a metre off the ground, and woke up in the pros office. So I had quite a big problem in my eye. And of course I'm just trying to think, it was my son had been born the night before. So after the golf day, of course, I drove into Camperdown, and the wife said, "I can't leave you alone for a minute, can we?"
Well, in those days we had a basketball teams, and some of the girls played basketball, but they were nearly always there when their elder brothers or little brothers played soccer, you know. They was always, the whole family would come, yeah.
I think you had to have a brother playing with Ravens at the time, or come back with a note saying that, and if you've got a sister that's interested in playing basketball at that time, before they changed it to netball. And so then I just sort of went from there.
When we started to do the research for the 50, I didn't realise, but in those early days, we had a tennis group. We had also a table tennis bunch of guys, and the girls who played what they played netball was basketball for the first couple of years. And so netball has always been sort of strong with the club, usually around the 25 to 35 teams in a comp.
My first recollection is Irene Picton. She, I think, was one of the early presidents of Eastwood Ride, or went on to be a president of Eastwood Ride. She also, I know, took us on carnivals, I think, when we were probably 13, 14, 15 and stuff. Ev Cummings, whose daughters all played, Sandra, Diane and Wendy, and along with Joan Slater, Paul's mum.
Jack Cummings was the prince of storytellers. Jack used to sit up there in Controversy Corner and overlook the park, but he'd regale us with so many stories.
Doug Duvall, he got his name by Warwick Higgins saying to him, he was down the far end of the field there with a rake raking out some grass or levelling something, bit of top dressing off, and he said, look at Doug DeVol down there, he just looks like the farmer. And he got the name The Farmer from then, and Joe Kendall's kids used to call him The Farmer. And when June took them into town one day and they saw Farmer's store, it was in town, they thought Doug DeVol owned it.
The characters that have come out of the club are just amazing.
I recall going to a meeting at a guy's place called Bob Galafassi, where a group of guys got together and said, well, look, we all want to play Federation soccer. And I think it was called inter-suburban soccer in those days.
Later on, you've got the next generation, as it was, the likes of Max himself, who was very successful, and Slater, and blokes like that were successful in life and were able to put back those skills that they learned back into the organisation. And right through, there's been tremendous organisation of this club.
A guy called Joe Kendall was the head selector of the inter-suburban team. And I remember having trials down here at Peel Park, and I wanted to play right half. And Joe said, you're not playing right half, you're not a right half. Okay, you've got to play right back. I don't want to play right back. So I spat the dummy, and I went and played rugby union for 3 years with some workmates.
We had an inter-suburban team and we were running near the bottom. We were beaten 10-1 by West Ryde Rovers. And by the end of the year, we were going pretty well okay. The next year, we got a few new players and we won the inter-suburban. So we went to what was then First Division Federation. We beat West Ryde Rovers in a playoff, so that was sweet revenge. We beat them 3-1 here and 3-0 down at LH Ward Ground, so it was basically a 6-1 revenge for the 10-1 loss 18 months earlier.
Just through a series of promotion and relegation and success, the club got promoted up to, I guess, the mid-80s, basically could have gone to State League Division 1. And we were very fortunate that we had a lot of guys that were good administrators. We had very good players, and a lot of those players were young guys that had played for the club, had gone to pursue careers at a higher level, had succeeded, and then had come back to the club.
We played in the under-18s. There was the Federation era, so played in the under-18s, and then we had reserve grade and first grade. So we did pretty good in those years at Federation level. Got up to State League, which we eventually held for a number of years. None of us got paid, and you know, we were all sort of mates in those days. Trained hard. Probably the football ability wasn't quite there like a lot of the other clubs, but we had some good trainers like Johnny Johnson, who used to run us pretty hard. Dennis Ford got involved. There was a postman who used to coach, and so that was some fun times.
At the Federation level, now known as State League, that was probably the best part about the club in my memory, because we basically, probably 90%, in excess of 90% of the players were local kids that if you didn't grow up with, they were older than you. A lot of the players that were, could be 10, 15 years older than you at the time, you looked up to, knew them as children, came and watched them as kids. We used to be able to walk to training because your training was local, so you'd walk with your teammates. So it was a classic old story you'd hear from our grandparents, how they played rugby league or whatever at Balmain, Roselle and so on, and how they got to training. I can remember I used to come down and walk down to watch third grade play if I was, as I was playing higher grades, but even if I was playing first grade, you'd be here before third grade, because you used to know most of the kids in that as well and be here for the whole day.
Well, I was fortunate. I was always good enough to play in a high grade. I started, there was no under sixes when I started, so we started in under 7Cs, and obviously I was 2 years behind. In under 10s, I think it was, I was asked to go back to my age group, which was a Division 1 team anyway, and they were a good side. Progressed from there, missed out on reps and played in a lower division, under 15s I think it was. And from memory, the next year we played under 16 Division 3, and we won our first 3 games by mega goals, and the association actually put us up in the first division, which had been unheard of before that, and I don't think it's ever happened since. And then I progressed up there through 3rd grade federation, 2nd grade federation. Ended up not being good enough to play 2nd grade. You had to have so many under 21s, and I was 22 and just wasn't good enough, so I went and played all age. And eventually it came around that we started playing Premier League. When I was playing federation 2nd grade, I think it was Jimmy Perry asked me to coach. So that's when I started coaching when I was 18 or 19.
When I came to Ravens, they used to do a road run down the Woolwich Pier and play touch football. And when I took over as coaching, I banned the rugby ball and tried to make everything to do with soccer. And I hope that I didn't get in the way of the social doing that. I got one close mate, and he'd be in and out of the team on a regular basis, and he always said he knew when I walked out of the dressing shed and called him over, he's in 2nd grade this week. But these guys accepted that, and they were perfectly happy about that. It wasn't as if you were fighting for your life, fighting for a career or anything like that. If you're in seconds, okay, you played in seconds, and everyone was happy. I think the only person ever to spit the dummy when they were dropped to seconds was probably myself in the early years.
And one of the good things about playing at Poole Park and being captain coach was that when you were running towards Morrison Road, you could play left fullback, as Jack Kendall suggested I should be a fullback. And when you come the other way, being captain coach, you played right fullback. So you always had a good grasp.
John Woodford told me once that he'd only be able to play up until half time on a Saturday, and he'd need to be replaced in the second half. And I said, why? What's the reason? He said, I'm getting married at 5 o'clock. So he kicked off at 3 o'clock. He played his 45 minutes, had a shower and ducked up to Christchurch and got married.
I started to play when I was 3 in 1967. I played 3 years in under 6s and went through Ravens lower grades, basically all the way up through to Federation. I come on in 1 game for 1st grade in Federation, so that was enough for me. Then when Ravens folded, I decided to give away the proper football and go and play Premier League, and hadn't looked back since. I mean, we formed Premier League all-age teams, culminating in the 35s Champions of Champions win, which was a highlight for everyone. And basically, grown up with kids and now adults that are mates, that have been mates for, 30, 40 years.
But Federation soccer was I guess, one of the highlights. The success of the Federation side was one of the highlights of the Ravens, and I think we ended up being a victim in a way of our own success, that it became such a good burden on the club, but we just succeeded so much that it was sad to have to give away the Federation soccer, but it was, I think, in the best interest of the club to do so, the junior club anyway.
Back in the early 70s, when I was in my early 20s, like in those days, you may have heard from others too, we had something like 26, 27 people on the committee, so I was just on the general committee and just sort of hang around and did things then. I was always involved in coaching, had a couple of years travelling overseas and sort of come back and then settled into it again, and sort of been coaching on and off for quite a number of years, both with my daughter's team and also young kids.
My son was born in 72, so he got it when he was under 6s. He came to the Ravens and sort of continued the family tradition of playing for the Ravens.
Probably my highlight is coaching. I love coaching the kids. The enjoyment, I got probably more enjoyment out of coaching than what I did with, playing myself.
I enjoy the coaching aspect of the game, I always have, but basically I do it now. 1, because I enjoy it, 2, because you try and develop kids for the game itself, if you do just doing your own little bit as much as possible. And hopefully some of those kids will continue on into our Premier League or whatever. But first and foremost, keep my sanity because I'm not playing. So I think I couldn't take a clean cut.
Very proud of my coaching, seeing them go on to, you know, adults now and married with kids, and I think, my God.
I have very fond memories of some canteen duty at Peel Park. And I think we might have been the parents of an under 10 side, say, and it was our turn to do canteen duty. And there was 3 guys given the job of, we were the last ones on. Bruce Robinson, who was club secretary when I was president, and a guy called, I think it was Cole McIndoe and Clive Roberts. There might have been 4 of us in the canteen, and there was some leftover Ravens anniversary port. So while we were serving people, we were just having a little drink here and there of the port. And we finished serving, the day had finished, we cleaned up, but we'd run out of port. So I rang my wife, Sandra, we were living in North Ryde, and asked her to bring some more supplies and also to come so that she'd be able to drive us home. And Sandra brought down some more port and we drank it. We said, well, that is the best port that we have had all day. And what she had done, she had mixed up the dregs of about 6 bottles of port, put them into 1 bottle and brought it down to us, and we knew no different.
Initially, I wanted to play rugby league as a 7-year-old, but my mother told me I was too small for that. I probably still am. So Mum and Dad brought me down to Gladesville Ravens tryouts, and I've been here pretty much ever since. So apart from the Rebel tour over to Gladesville United, where we went over and played State League in my early 20s, I've been playing at some capacity with the Ravens. So. Had a stint on the board as the men's soccer supervisor, or what's now known as the director of men's football, which is quite a fancy title, and obviously run Premier League for the last 12, 13 years.
I followed my son into soccer. I come out of the USA, I knew not a thing about the rules of the game, but it seemed to be a fun thing for kids to do, for boys to do at the time. A team game, which appealed to me. I like team sport and that kind of cooperation. And so I was standing on the sideline watching the under-8s, and someone said, somebody's got to collect the money. Now, in those days, it was an envelope system. It was 20 cents a week, week after week after week, and you put the money in the envelope, and then you turn it into the treasurer and the next week you do the same. Well, someone had to do that. So I thought, well, if I'm going to stand here anyway, I can do that.
The main 3 sports have been women's football, which Lee Owens and Jeff Saul have been a major contribution there, and then men's football and obviously the netballs.
I also had 3 daughters, and the girls were growing. And the eldest of the 3 was 2 years older than my son, and was not slow in making her opinions and feelings felt. And at some point she said, Dad, David's getting all of your time and the girls would like some of it too. And I thought, that's a pretty good point, Dad. Listen to what she's telling you. And I thought, now, one of the neatest things to be able to do in sharing my time with the daughters is to have them play soccer. Girls didn't play.
Late 70s, I got involved in women's soccer as a referee. Didn't know women played, but I was a uni student and my referees coordinator said, you want to do some extra games? And they were women, so I got interested. Met Lal Byers in the Epping Eastwood team, and in the end of the 81 season, he asked me to come across and coach teams at Epping Eastwood. I had my coach's badge by that stage. And that's, I suppose, when I became involved against the Ravens.
I found an opportunity to introduce myself to Lal at a women's, a New South Wales Women's Championship Day at Chatswood Oval. And I said, Lal, you know, if, just This is who I am. I'm with Gladesville Ravens. If you're thinking of a local women's soccer association, I would be interested. I have no idea where the Ravens would be, but I will make the case to Ravens to be a part of it. I presented to the executive committee there's still a copy of it in the archives, a proposal that the executive put up a bit of money, and I calculated how much, a set of shirts, some training balls, and that, and support soccer for girls. And there were blinks all around the table, but to their credit, they said basically, Lee, if you think it's a good idea, we'll back it. And so we put together for the 1982 season, which was the first of the Gladesville Hornsby competition seasons, a Ravens club entry. We had an all-age team and an under-16s team.
And so Ravens was our biggest opposition. Epping Eastwood was the leading club in those first few years. And I met Lee Owens, who was publicity officer on those same committees. So I knew Ravens across the other side of the field, and I knew Lee across the other side of the committee table.
I was under-16s because we spent a few years in under-16s. That was the lowest division they had. We started as mainly school friends, just decided to play soccer because all our brothers did.
That first side, that first all-age side, which I coached, was a combination of some girls with a year's experience, like my daughter, some girls who had played a little bit at school. Schools were nibbling at the idea of girls playing soccer. Malvina High School, for example. And so there's a couple girls who had played there, but that wasn't enough. And I thought, where can we get up to 11 or 12 females so we can form this side? And we recruited a couple of netball senior women. In a sense, I think they knew they were pioneers, and they knew they were going to have to do things a little bit better than the boys were doing, because if they didn't, they were going to be laughed at, and they didn't want to be laughed at.
Lynn got a nickname, Arnie Lynn, and I think that sort of stuck with her for a long time. Everyone called her Arnie Lynn, right from, you know, Macca's soccer team of adults called her Arnie Lynn. And, but she was always one of those people that, no matter where there was a Ravens team on, she turned up to support it. You know, she'd turn up, she'd be coaching an 8 o'clock game at Brush Farm, and then umpire one, and then take off to coach another one at Meadowbank, and then umpire one and play herself, and, you know. So she's one of those ladies that really inspired people to want to do things because she was so active.
But I also enjoyed the involvement, being involved in how the soccer and everything else ran. A lot of good memories of the meetings, you know, down at Henley Bowling Club.
She probably doesn't recognise it, but Lynn McDonald, at a time when she was, you know, sort of netball supervisor, to be an active female soccer player was wonderful. It was subtle publicity. We never held her out there and said, you know, look at this, but it meant that there was acceptance within the sport.
When she decided to put on the shin pads and the socks, yeah, we all decided we always wanted to play in her team. We went from juniors and played in with her and Stella McFarlane. Between them, just an absolute classic on the court. On the field, I think the year I played with them, I was in goals, and I think we scored more goals against ourselves than the teams could score against us. They were funny years, you know, like they had no idea what they were doing, and they'd just kick it whichever direction they were facing. So as a goalkeeper, it was very challenging.
The end of the fourth season, 1985, we had genuine soccer players who were stretching me as a coach. I mean, I'm fine. I was fine with beginners. With the reasonably talented, they were looking for strategy and tactics, and I really had to train myself and to get my act together in a way that I hadn't had to with novices and juniors.
1985, I went travelling. I wasn't involved in soccer in Sydney as I was moving around Australia for 12 months. Came back at the end of that year and went back to Epping Eastwood and said, back, ready to get started again, you know, what's there for me? And regrettably, there wasn't much. I was ambitious and wanted to move up, and, you know, they'd sort of filled their positions for 86, which I understand. So I came down, and I remember the day, I had coffee with Lee at his place and said, mate, you know, I'm back, want to get involved again. Have you got a position for me to coach in 86? And Lee, being like he was, had already started to plan his succession and had already handed over his first grade team at the end of 85 to a new coach for 1986. But he said, yeah, I'm sure we can find, you know, team, lower divisions, you know, and I said, happy to get started. And so I was sort of sitting around in that off-season, ready to thinking I'm going to pick up a, you know, third division team or something or other with Ravens the next year, and I'm still tickled by this. I knew a lot of the players in Lee's first grade team. I'd coached them in the district rep teams in the years prior to travelling in 83, 84. I was one of the coaches in the Gladesville district rep teams, and a lot of the Ravens girls were in there. And a few of them had come to me and they'd said, you know, oh, we wish you'd known you were coming back because, you know, with Lee retiring, we'd love to have you as a coach. And I was tittle pink to have, you know, people say that. So a group of them went to Lee, and long story short, they basically somehow managed to convince him to change his mind and reverse an appointment that he'd made. And he offered me the first grade team for 1986, and the first grade coach became the second grade coach.
I was thinking last night how many mates that I've had and how many I've got now. I look back and most of them are through football, and most of them are through Ravens. And you can't get that too many places.
I played with Bilesy for how many years, I don't know. Probably maybe 30, he can correct me on that. But another fond memory I have is actually the day that we came down to Peel Park to register our two sons together in under sixes, which would have been, I think, January of 1994. And I remember we walked into the ground together and thought it was like kids starting school. It was an occasion where we brought our kids down to join the same club that we commenced playing with at a young age.
Well, for me, the club gave me 17, 18 years of playing as a kid. You know, I was coached by, I think Malcolm Reeves, one of the first ones. There was Rob Hindmarsh. There was Noel Biles. Then it was Famo, Alan Pride. And he coached in the third grade, which we had a great team. You just want to put something back.
Well, in 86, our second division team was dominant in that competition, was very dominant, and were told they were going to be promoted. And so in 87, we had what I think is an unenviable position of having two teams from Ravens playing against each other in the top division. We'd already lost Margaret Young and Joe Capper, who'd moved on from Ravens to state lead. Happily, with the club's consent, and everyone said you had to go, even though it's sad because there was no future for them. And then I said, I sort of said to myself, and I was involved, you know, in New South Wales football with the women's at this stage too. I said it's not sustainable for Ravens to keep playing against Ravens at the top of the first division. So for us to stop players going away and for the club to progress, we made an entry in 87 for state lead, which got knocked back, but we made an entry in 1988 and got into women's state lead. So we were able to merge the top two teams out of the first division and take them into women's state league.
Really major contribution and development was the Gladesville Ravens entry into women's state league, which was Jeff Soul's considerable contribution, and that then was an enormous pull for junior girls. If in the sense of, if that's what we can aim at, we start now at 9, 10, 11 and begin working ourselves up because when we get good enough, we can be state league players.
I think there's two things in this reinvention, and one is reflecting or reacting to community's needs and that. And baseball, T-ball was a strong example. Kids were coming out of cricket when cricket was slow to move from the whole day, half day activities kids didn't want into the 1 hour T-ball activity. So kids voted with their feet, and our cricket numbers were dropping. And so for 20 years we put T-ball baseball in.
Baseball came and went. It was a bit of a trendy sport for a short period of time. However, guys like Nick Liotta, who was a great friend of ours, he had a great input into that.
I think our kids were played a bit of soccer, and we got involved in the Ravens that way. And then they were playing T-ball, I think, at school. And we then, the Ravens then, I think, had just started playing T-ball and baseball then. And for some reason, I think it was Jock Cunningham actually heard me one day. I was there with my kids, and it was, I think, the end of the season, and he heard my accent. So right away he assumed I must know all about baseball. I told him I didn't. I didn't actually play baseball in Canada, but that didn't help, of course. Knowing Jock, you know, he was pretty adamant. And he talked me into taking on the role of managing the baseball teams. And I said, well, I really don't have time because I've got a lot of work, you know, and so on. What's involved? And he said, oh, it's easy. All you have to do at the beginning of the season, it's a little bit of coordination at the beginning of the season, and then you just have to sort of track the scores and have a meeting with the coaches occasionally, and that's pretty much it. And so I signed up on that basis. Little did I know that there was a lot more than that involved.
Well, T-ball was, you know, really good for the kids. You know, sort of, I remember many Saturdays or Sundays coming down here and, you know, seeing these, you know, little softball going out.
We were sort of seen, I think, a bit as sort of new starters and underdogs. So wherever we went, it was a big thrill to be playing against, you know, the likes of North Ryde and Ryde Eastwood and these other clubs, and to actually occasionally win against them. It was a great feeling, and we got really excited about it, and the parents got excited, and the kids got excited about it, and it was sort of that sort of challenge of being sort of not having a history but trying to make a history, and to grow the sport.
I think that, and I've said this to the boys, that maybe the happiest time as a memory that I had was being involved with my kids playing a sport. And it turns out it was baseball with the Gladesville Ravens. And I don't say that lightly. It was a great opportunity when fathers and sons, or fathers and daughters, can be involved in an activity.
I was too young to really remember cricket because it was a fair while ago, but I remember baseball coming in and trying to organise uniforms and stuff for baseball. I wasn't one of the organisers, but being around the committee and talking about what they're going to wear and what they're not going to wear and what's practical, what's not practical, what's affordable. So baseball coming in and out was a big expense for the club to supply the gear and the equipment, and it just got more and more expensive as the years got on, and that was probably one of the reasons why it didn't quite make it, because we weren't a dedicated baseball, T-ball, whatever you want to call it at the time, club. We were really behind the eight ball, you know, third country type equipment compared to the big clubs.
I think the point was reached probably late 90s, maybe the early noughties, where we were arguably, because there wasn't strong records around Australia, the largest women's soccer club in Australia. You know, we topped 400 individual female players, and I didn't know another club around Australia that had that many. And we also reached that point where we became a 50-50 club with men's and women's in the same club, which also was almost unknown. There were some clubs that were women's only, there was other clubs that men's that had a few women's teams. But to have equal numbers in the 30s, you know, 30, 35 men's and boys teams, 30, 35 you know, women's and girls teams, was where we got to, and we were ecstatic.
I took over, I think it was 99, 2000, I think it was. And basically we were trying to reinvent the club. It was a point where the club was losing a lot of juniors. There was a lot of competition from other local clubs. We used the success of our over 35s team with, you know, we had Mark Koussis, an ex-Australian player. We had a lot of ex-NSL players. And we used that to basically leverage off and and build a brand, if you like, the brand Gladesville Ravens.
One of the things I love is the connection with Football New South Wales or the Federation. I mean, we're in the Men's Federation, 60s and 70s, early 80s, that dropped out. But when Women's State League came in, they still knew us. There were still people there. And so honestly, in terms of Federation football or Football New South Wales football, Ravens have almost been there for 45 of our 50 years. Half of it with men's and half of it with women.
Over the latter years, I think that's one thing that is missing, the social aspect. In my late mid-20s, early 20s, I remember they used to always have at least 2 or 3 social functions a year, which was good because that's how you met friends, you know, you met the parents of the kids that you were involved in coaching. You know, rock and roll nights and, you know, just dinner dances or things like that. But foremost, I'd say it's a sporting club. Mainly soccer, that's how it started. And I think it'll always be a big and strong soccer club. As much as I love my netball, I'm proud to say that I was involved with, you know, getting a few teams more and more, you know, sort of compared to what we used to have a lot of teams donkeys years ago, had a lull and then we came back.
It's a tough one, I think. If you'd sort of been there and then went away for a while and came back again, you may have noticed some changes. But having been somewhat of a constant, it's sort of hard to pick any real changes. Obviously, we've had the, you know, the board structures have changed slightly and we've brought in new positions. There's probably a tad more professionalism now.
To see the names Christine Rudge and Jeff Saul and Michelle Heffernan on the life members list, you know, I look back and think, I remember Chris as the goalkeeper in that under-16 side.
Probably our biggest claim of fame is playing on ANZ Stadium last year, the Champions of Champions, and winning as well. So that was probably, you know, at 42, most of us, our biggest claim of fame. It's taken that long to get there, but now it's time to retire, I think.
I looked at our over 35s team, and so many of them are people, well, I mean, the Margaret Basses, the Joe Kappas, you know, I mean, with married names than they are now. Started here as teenagers when we started, and now back playing in our over 35s while their daughters are still playing in the club.
Never would have thought, yeah, just as kids running around over at Peel Park or Morrison Bay that you'd ever end up at a place like that. But I think the importance is what gets you there is the people that were on the park they're with. And it's not the fact that we got there, it was who we were playing with. There were people that were in my under-16 team, there's 3 of us that were on that park together again, and that's what makes it sort of special when you're standing with people that started at Ravens with you and are still playing.
Next challenge for the Ravens should be to continue the work that everyone has done before them. It's like an ongoing life form, if you like. We need to feed it, and we need to make sure that it grows so that the work of the people that started the club in the 60s, the people that built it in the 70s and continued it through the 80s, 90s and 2000s doesn't get lost.
I think it's been a family club, and I'd always like to think it was going to stay that way. You know, there's many memories down here, especially on the hill over here where a lot of the guys used to come down and watch Federation, now they come down and watch Premier League.
I can only think that our solid record to date will hold good for the future of the club.
Yeah, great family club, and I think for it to still be in existence 50 years later, tremendous tribute to the guys and ladies that founded it, and a great tribute to everybody that's come along and kept it going.
It's really all about the club and the club management and the club directors and the parents to a large extent too, recognising what their kids are interested in, and then the club taking the lead, I think, from that. And if the local kids are interested in a particular sport, then I think it's great that the Ravens actually looks at that sport and considers whether it's whether we have the resources or whether the club has the resources to support support that sport and to get it going and to get parents involved to the extent that they can be coaches and managers and so on. And I think that's been the history over the last 50 years, and I have no doubt that it will continue for the next 50 years at least.
The Ravens is most important because it's one of those things that's developed a great camaraderie with a lot of people. It's developed a spirit in the club, and the club spirit is enormous. And initially, I know it was only soccer, but that spread now to particularly the women's soccer and cricket and golf and even I started table tennis. It's tremendously important, and it just creates a togetherness, which is so unusual in this modern world.
Sort of lost contact always though. We see each other every now and then and someone says, how's the Ravens going? And we're really excited that it's such a huge club and it's so well known. And that gives you a little bit of a feeling in the old ticket.
Our club thrives or survives on the volunteer effort. And everyone says it's hard to get volunteers, and it is, and I'm still in, association management myself, so I know that. I was at the end of my club presidency in the mid-90s. We went through a crisis where we were at our wits' ends, you just went through these eras where everyone had disappeared and there was no one left to do it. We reinvented ourselves by restructuring. We went from an executive committee to a board of directors, restructured the way we managed our volunteers. And I think that gave us another boost and kept us going for, 10, 15 years after that. And I was pleased, to see that work. When I've read the records, I've discovered that was actually the third time we've done that, not the first. And I didn't realise this. 1981, Paul Slater's presidency, I saw exactly the same thing in the middle. The crisis call to a meeting. If no one turns up for the meeting, the club will fold. Well, everyone turned up. And we seem to go from, if you read the first minutes of the 60s, we had an executive committee of 27 people. 1981, there was 2 people left and, let's get something done, a mid-year crisis meeting. They changed the board, they changed the way we manage it, more volunteers came out. Late 80s, early 90s, we thrived. We dropped off again, we built up again.
I think we can be very proud of the fact that we provided sport in the community over 50 years.
We all agree the Ravens are magic. Their skill and their cunning, their tireless running, they must be the team for me. That's about it.